This drive to produce a super profit does not mean that less and less labor is happening in society. It means that the same amount of labor is producing more output. We are often told that machines will make life easier, reducing the need for work. But this has never been the case in a capitalist society. Machines just create more output per hour worked. Oftentimes, machines are used to get more work out of workers because the machine can dictate the pace and intensity of work. Socially necessary labor time is a force that presses down upon us, disciplining our motions, driving us to produce value merely for the sake of producing value, rewarding us when we can produce above the average productivity, and punishing us when we fall behind. Capitalists compete to lower the socially necessary labor time by investing in fancier equipment. The better the machines, the more efficient the labor process, the higher the output, the lower the prices, the more super profit, the more money available to invest in new machines, the more efficient the labor process, the higher the output, the lower the prices, the more super profit, the more money available to invest in new machines, the more efficient the labor process, the higher the output, the lower the prices, the more super profit, the more money available to invest in new machines, the more efficient the labor process, the higher the output, the lower the prices, the more super profit, the more money available. The tools we use to critique capitalism determine how we envision an alternative to capitalism. Models for market socialism that talk of worker-owned cooperatives coordinated by market exchange clearly see that production for the enrichment of the capitalist class must be done away with if we are to overcome capitalism. Yet, any society coordinated by market exchange is still disciplined by socially necessary labor time. This means that workers in such a society would still have to discipline their actions to the social average. Cooperatives that worked at under the socially necessary labor time would appropriate value in exchange. And co-ops would compete to modernize their equipment so as to lower the socially necessary labor time. And how would co-ops obtain the money to invest in better labor-saving equipment? They would have to exploit themselves. That is, the more money that workers want to plow back into making their labor competitive, the less they can pay themselves. Not only would the workers be disciplined by socially necessary labor time, they would also find themselves disciplined by the need to amass surplus value so as to stay competitive. What happens to the workers in firms driven out of business by the centralization of industries? Where do they get capital to start new firms? Do they have to sell their labor in the market? Production of surplus value for its own sake, fierce competition over super profits, the disciplining of the labor process to the whims of impersonal market forces. Sound familiar? Now perhaps one might be of the opinion that it is impossible to do away with socially necessary labor time with market coordination. If this is the case, then our best option is to debate what type of market socialism would be least exploitative, least alienating. But why not challenge ourselves to imagine a world without these things? A world without what? This seems to be the big question whenever we critique capitalism. Surely labor will always take time, and we must always have a way of coordinating labor to produce all the goods society needs. And surely this labor must not just produce immediate goods, but also surplus goods, as well as invest in long-term projects like infrastructure and machines that will make work better in the future. So we can't say that we want to produce a society without work, without time, without surplus product, or without machines. What is unique about capitalism is that labor time, surplus, and commodities are all measured in value. The types of commodities created, the types of assets the surplus is invested in, and the quality of the life of those who do the labor are not important. What is important is this endless expansion of value for its own sake. This is capital's defining substance. But if we are to coordinate human labor, the production of surpluses, innovation, and distribution without value production, then what other method are we to use? It is not within the scope of this series to evaluate different proposals for alternatives to capitalism. But it is the place to talk about how Marx's analysis of socially necessary labor time might help us in evaluating these different proposals. We've probably all heard Marx's famous description of the higher phase of communism, from each according to his ability to each according to his need. Marx didn't actually come up with this phrase, but he quotes it in one of his rare commentaries on communism. Here, an hour of one person's work is equal to an hour of anyone else's, creating a basis for real equality throughout society, regardless of the productive abilities or privileges of individuals. In the Critique of the Gotha program, Marx describes the lower phase of communism as a system in which, after an hour of labor, all workers receive a certificate, entitling them to a certain amount of consumption goods in proportion to their working time, not their level of productivity. There is no socially necessary labor time and no inequality, because everyone's work has the same social power. Obviously, this is not a robust plan for how a communist society should be run, but it gives us a glimpse into the sort of radical questions we should be asking ourselves when thinking about communism. Our private labor doesn't immediately become social. It must become value in order to be social. But in becoming value, it is disciplined by a socially necessary labor time. Socially necessary labor time acts as an external force which disciplines our private labor, constantly compelling us to work more efficiently, yet never actually making our work easier or more fulfilling. Socially necessary labor time creates the possibility for super profits when one produces under the socially necessary labor time. And the search for super profits drives much of the mad, chaotic development of the productive forces of a capitalist society, generating all sorts of unforeseen consequences. In a society not producing for competition or capital, but for communal ownership, there would not be a socially necessary labor time in this same sense. This means that work would not exist in order to make value. Work would exist in order to both provide use values for society and to better the life of the worker. In our culture, we have an intense fascination with those rare people whose work is fulfilling and challenging. Great musicians, athletes, artists, they inspire us because these are people whose work has challenged them to become the best possible person they can be. Perhaps in a world without socially necessary labor time, such an experience of work could become more universal.